Please welcome back the President and CEO of the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation, Joel R. Johnson.
Hello. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a lovely break there. We had some really interesting conversations already this morning at Capitol Hill Ocean Week, and we're going to keep rolling. So I think it's really obvious that we need a lot of people power to do our work, and a lot of the people who support CHOW and Capitol Hill Ocean Week aren't just here with us in this room, they're also online. So thank you so much for tuning in virtually. We really appreciate your presence. And also thank you for exploring the different booths that we have in the hall and learning more about what our sponsors do. Our sponsors are such a critical part of CHOW because they help keep it free and open to the public, which is part of our story and our gift from the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. Okay, so America's history, of course, is maritime history. It's the story of this nation. From the Great Lakes to the ocean, our nation has been shaped by exploration and discovery, innovation and commerce, yes, war, and also greater cultural inclusion. All of these are parts of creating an enduring connection to the water that many of us have experienced. Our first plenary today, Voyages and Breakthroughs of a Maritime Nation, brings together a very distinguished panel of experts who are actively working to shape America's next era of ocean and maritime leadership. From exploration, underwater archaeology, to indigenous stewardship, maritime storytelling, and next generation technologies to help us explore our waters. As I said earlier today, as we approach our nation's 250th anniversary and look to the future, this panel here at CHOW brings together a very diverse set of practitioners who are working at very critical and important sites and with different communities who have a voice and that need to be heard. So I'm going to introduce the panelists to you and then ask them to join me on stage. Cathy Green is the President and Executive Director of the National Maritime Historical Society. She is a maritime archaeologist and former NOAA Great Lakes Grant Administrator whose career is focused on preserving submerged cultural resources and expanding public engagement with our maritime heritage. Hoege is the President and CEO of the Mariners Museum and Park. He helps lead one of the world's largest maritime conservation efforts, including the preservation of the Civil War ironclad ship, the USS Monitor, and has been responsible for supporting groundbreaking research on its recovered turret and millions of artifacts. Dr. Alexis Catsambis is Director, Underwater Archaeology Branch at the U.S. Naval History and Heritage Command. His work leads research and preservation efforts for some of America's most historically significant naval wrecks and underwater heritage sites. Nakia Zavalla is the Tribal Council member and Tribal Historic Preservation Officer of the San Ynez Band of Chumash Indians. She brings incredible indigenous maritime knowledge, generations of cultural stewardship, rooted in deep relationships with coastal waters, and voyaging traditions. Keith van Graafeiland is the Senior Principal GIS Engineer and Ocean Content Lead at Esri, a leading mapping organization where he leads development of ocean and marine data layers of the ArcGIS Living Atlas of the world. His work helps translate complex oceanographic data into practical tools, many of us that are familiar with, for conservation, marine planning, and the ocean economy decision-making. Let's please welcome our panelists to the stage. Okay, well, welcome everyone. I would like to give you some space and time to introduce yourselves again and your work to our audience. And then we'll have a discussion, and at the end of the discussion, we'll also take questions from the audience and provide them with some further discussion. So why don't we go ahead and start, Cathy Green, with you, and you can kind of kick us off this morning.
Thanks, Joel.
Great.
Cathy Green. I'm the president of the National Maritime Historical Society. We're a national nonprofit that's dedicated to the protection and a promotion of our maritime heritage. We do that through preservation projects, through education, through advocacy, and also through storytelling. We've been doing this for over 60 years. We publish Sea History magazine. You've seen us right at the corner there on your way in, so grab a whole bunch of magazines and see what we're all about. We're excited to be here today and part of this conversation with a really great group of people.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Cathy, for that introduction. We'll just go forward with Alexis.
Hello, I'm Alexis Catsambis. I head the Navy's Underwater Archaeology Program at the Naval History and Heritage Command. The mission of the Naval History and Heritage Command is to preserve and present an accurate history of the U.S. Navy. It's a multifaceted organization comprised of 10 museums, an art collection, a curatorial facility, the Navy's operational archives and library, and among all the other programs is the Underwater Archaeology Program. Our mission is to manage, research, interpret, and preserve the U.S. Navy's sunken military craft. There are about 3,000 shipwrecks, about 18,000 aircraft wrecks, spanning from the beginning of the nation through to the modern day and distributed around the world. And our mission is served through 4 primary functions. We have a management responsibility. We set policy associated with sunken military craft. We have field operations and support the adaptation of technology to better interpret and preserve sites. We have a conservation laboratory meant to treat and stabilize artifacts recovered from these sites. And ultimately, we have a public outreach function to help raise appreciation for this naval history of ours.
Thank you, Alexis. And since you're based in the Naval Yard, can you tell us a little bit about the space there that you help moderate?
Sure. We are somewhat like a campus. The Navy's operational archives and library and the art collection I referenced earlier are all focused in the central Washington Navy Yard area. But we also have our laboratory there and a curatorial facility with about 35,000 artifacts. And it's really one of the leading federal laboratories dedicated to the conservation of artifacts recovered from marine environment.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And now, Nakia, if you would introduce yourself.
Sure, let me go ahead and, wrong button.
If you could move to the next slide, please.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Technology, you gotta love it, right?
Technology. If you guys could move to the next slide, please, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Haku everybody, Maktuka Nakia Zavalla, ala palahulapu, ni samala Chumashino. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nakia Zavalla. I'm from the Sandinas Band of Chumash Indians. We are located in Santa Barbara County in California. I am the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer that's responsible for upholding consultation with government agencies on protection of sacred sites, as well as ancestors. I'm also the Tribal Cultural Liaison, so I work with agencies with ensuring cultural knowledge is ensured in any possible way when we're doing consultation. I also am the chair of the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. I hold the primary Indigenous knowledge seat, that I share with 3 other Chumash people. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for your leadership at the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. Really appreciate it. Keith, if you would introduce yourself.
Yeah, hello everybody. It's great to be here with you all today. My name is Keith Van Graafeiland, and I am a senior principal GIS engineer working on the ArcGIS Living Atlas of the World team at Esri. So Esri is the company behind ArcGIS, and for those of you who don't know, so Esri was founded in 1969 by Jack and Laura Dangermond, and the E actually stands for Environmental Systems Research Institute. So founded on, studying environmental data and the geographic information system behind making the maps. And Esri supports a lot of the maps that most of you all are probably familiar with in this room. So we support agencies like NOAA, BOEM, USGS, National Marine Sanctuaries Program, the Navy as well, to be able to create a picture of the ocean that everybody can see, hopefully through a similar lens, whether you're a GIS practitioner or a policy maker up here on the Hill. So it's great to be here today, and I'm really interested to see where this panel goes. So thanks for including me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Keith. And last but not least, Howard, please.
Absolutely. I'm Howard Hoege, the President and CEO at the Mariners Museum and Park. The U.S. Congress designated the Mariners Museum as one of the 2 museums that comprise America's National Maritime Museum in the late 90s. And today we're close to 300,000 square feet of roof line, home to the Batten Conservation Complex, which, as Joel said in the introduction, is one of the largest, most advanced conservation labs of any maritime museum in the world. And we'll surely talk about the Monitor Conservation Project today. We also sit in a 550-acre park, which is one of the largest privately owned and operated but free and open to the public parks in the country. And today, June 2nd, we turned 96 years old, which we're really proud of and pleased about. And that original 1930 charter says that we're going to be a museum and a library that preserves maritime heritage within a park on a lake, and the way that, but it says that we exist to promote the public welfare. And the way that we interpret promoting the public welfare today is by building social capital in the local, national, and global communities that we serve. And so we took that cue from the charter to promote the public welfare and this idea of social capital. And many of you know that there's a growing body of literature that says the higher the level of social capital in a community, the more resilient that community is. The higher level of social capital in a community, the greater potential for economic growth in that community. So we took that cue, and we, about a decade ago, decided to reposition ourselves much more as a community resource and think about ourselves less as an attraction. We have a new mission statement. That mission says that we connect people to the world's waters because through the waters, through our shared maritime heritage, we're connected to one another. And the idea is that that shared connection to the water holds the promise of transcending race, gender, age, socioeconomics, all the ways that we're sometimes made to feel different from one another. And I look forward during the course of the panel talking about the fact that we say the conservation of that maritime heritage and the health and sustainability of the natural resource that we're stewards of is the foundation of everything that we do. And while we're not a children's museum, we say that the school-age child is the most important segment of the community that we serve. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. And I think I heard in your introductions as well the beginnings of answering my next question, which is how do we define maritime heritage today? And I have a provocative follow-up question for all of you. And I think hopefully it will stimulate the conversation, and I think as well as stimulate our audience to start thinking about this question. Are we entering the greatest era of ocean exploration in history? So those are my opening questions to you all. What's the definition of maritime heritage? And are we entering the greatest era of ocean exploration in history? Would anyone like to take the first question?
I'll take a stab at that. I guess to me, maritime heritage is that accumulated relationship of you know, our relationship with the water, humans' relationship with the water, and that includes those physical things: shipwrecks, vessels, waterfronts, ports, and communities. The knowledge that comes with all of these accumulated things over time. And you know, we shouldn't just mention the oceans, rivers, and Great Lakes as well. Mm-hmm. So in what we do with preserving that heritage, or doing our best to do that, it's not just about the artifacts itself. It's the stories, and it makes this a much more all-encompassing topic than just talking about boats, right? Mm-hmm. As far as are we entering the greatest era of exploration? I think it can be. Mm-hmm. I do think it can be. what we're experiencing now, we're exploring two different things simultaneously. So if we think about, we're expanding our technological capacity to go beyond what we've ever been able to do before, but we're also in a place where we can understand the ocean and the stories in our past in a way maybe we haven't been able to before, or we've overlooked, or we haven't made connections. So I think there's great potential here. It takes a concerted effort to, of course, put the resources, put the time and the willpower to do that. But I think it could be a very consequential and exciting time for that.
Great, thank you.
I like the reflective lens that you placed on that, introspective and looking backwards. And I think the answer to your question is probably multifold. On the one side, obviously, the access and the adoption of technology that has allowed us to investigate the ocean in ways that previously were hard to fathom is certainly indicative of a period of exploration that is fascinating. I would probably position the beginning of that period closer to the 1960s, 1970s, actually, with the Trieste and the Challenger Deep and the discovery of chemosynthesis and hydrothermal vents, and sort of an evolution from that. But it has accelerated in terms of progress, and in terms of accuracy and precision and swath, and how much we can map, how much we can understand and see and investigate. But the other aspect of that is, of course, that ocean exploration also encompasses things such as surface navigation, for example. And we'd be remiss not to look back and consider the Polynesian wayfarers or the Age of Discovery and that type of exploration as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Would anyone else like to address that? Keith?
I want to riff off a little bit of what Cathy said there. I think we are in a great era of the accumulation of everything that's been collected previously, whether it's a record from a buoy that was collected 100 years ago, or a lightkeeper's log, or a NOAA survey that went last week. We have this this accumulation of heritage information that's continuously being collected, and each new voyage, adds to that heritage. And in terms of the era that we're in now, is it the greatest? I think it offers the most potential to look back at what we've collected previously and compare it to what's happening now. So I think we have the ability, the reach back, and the technology to allow the synthesis of that information to look at things more cumulatively than we have previously. And for me, that's exciting, because we talked about the accumulation of this heritage, so that's kind of like a system of record that we're able to access and go back and understand better. And then, bridging off of that, we have the technology that allows us to bring all that together and promote it from these disparate data records into a higher level of information and understanding that comes out of that. And I think for those purposes, it's an exciting time.
And I think for us, Joel, one of the challenges that we have as a cultural institution in telling stories and things like this is that we take these really high levels of abstraction, right? What is maritime heritage? Is this the greatest age of ocean exploration? We have to make that tactile and make it accessible to folks. And so on the maritime heritage side, one of the ways that we try to do that is we have recognized that the value proposition for coming to a place like the Mariners Museum is a little less the story that we tell you. It's a little bit more about getting a individual member of the community in front of something that means something personally to them. And the story that I like to tell a lot about this happened to me when we were checking our admission numbers in August of 2017. We had recently adopted a $1 admission policy in order to create access broadly within the community. And while I was up there checking numbers, in walks this veteran, and he's wearing that black veteran baseball cap that those guys wear, right? And his says 101st Airborne Division on it. Well, that's the unit that I deployed to Iraq with. So I walked up to him and I said, "Sir, did you serve with the 101st?" And he says, "Yeah, I jumped into Normandy." And so I'm now peppering him with questions, right? He's 94 years old, he's on a walker, but he's sharp as a tack. And he stops me at some point and he says, "Do you have a model of the SS Strathnaver?" Well, I'm an Army guy. I don't know what the Strathnaver is, right? So I said, "I don't know, sir, but I can find out." So I ran around, found our director of collections management. Turns out we do have a model of the Strathnaver. Happens to be in one of our galleries. And so I bring him back there, and we're standing in front of the Strathnaver now, and he's standing there with his great-grandson next to him. And he points at the model and he says, "That's the boat that took me to Europe." And he starts to tell the story of the crossing, right? And so the value for him is not the exhibit that we do on troop transports and trying to explain maritime heritage. The value for him in that moment is he's 94. He wants to grab onto the real thing to relive that moment. And he wants to use that thing to communicate the story to his great-grandson. And that's kind of a building block of heritage. And if I can, just on the ocean exploration side, this is another thing where, well, what can I do, right? And one of the reasons, as I understand it, through our strong partnership with the Monitor National Marine Sanctuary, part of the reasons that we focus on cultural heritage, maritime heritage within the sanctuary system is to use it as a way to engage people with a broader conversation around the health of the oceans. And we've been fortunate that we do have this linkage between the environment and the maritime heritage, even in our charter. And so by virtue of having Monitor there, and by what I said earlier about the school-age child is the most important segment of the community that we serve, we were fortunate to win a NOAA BWET grant to serve our environmental stewardship side, even as we're partnering on the maritime heritage side. And so we ran a beta for ninth graders. It was a 3-year test that we've now been able to continue, where we brought every ninth grader from Newport News Public Schools, which is a school system that has really high concentrations of poverty in it. They did water quality testing at our lake. They took those samples back to their classroom, evaluated the data, the samples. They grew eelgrass, or the freshwater version of that's wild celery, I have learned, in their classrooms, and they returned to Mariners Lake to plant that eelgrass. With Old Dominion University, we partnered to try to understand the actual impact of that program on those ninth grade kids. And it turns out, number one, the kids are learning the material. Number two, they're reporting a greater personal sense of environmental stewardship. And number three, they're reporting a greater sense of connection to the Mariners Museum and Park, which we take as a proxy for feeling a part of something larger than themselves. And so I just say those two things as ways that we can kind of crack these abstractions of maritime heritage and ocean exploration or environmental stewardship.
Thank you for that. I think it certainly helps to hear how each of you have sort of made it real, right? And taken it from the abstract level down to how the communities actually engage. And that sort of leads me to one of my next questions for you all is there a recent maritime heritage discovery or expedition that has rewritten your expectations of your understanding of our waters, whether that's our oceans, our Great Lakes, or our rivers? So we're talking about something that has kind of changed the lens, I think, Alexis, you had said earlier. Does anybody want to maybe start with that? Nakia.
I did want to answer that last question.
Oh,
so sorry.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, that's okay. I'd love to hear your answer to the last question, and we'll come back to that question. That's great.
Okay, so answer the current question?
Sure, or whichever one you want.
Question. Okay, so I just want to speak on a maritime heritage for me as a Chumash person, and its deep connection to our ancestors. So I am the 7th great granddaughter of Kilikutiuwit, a grandfather that was born in the late 1700s. And when I think about maritime heritage and culture, I think about the stories that have been passed down. And really since time immemorial, that's gone through the ancestors. And certainly that represents the Zamalla Chumash people, but there are different Chumash tribes within our territory that accessed our ocean. and those deep connected stories to who we are that's been passed on through practices, songs, dances, and the different teachings by the ancestors through different generations. The ocean for us is medicine. It was utilized for healing of our people. It's a place of spiritual connection. My grandmother, Maria Solaris, said, "The sea rolls in and out as of the spirit world." So she understood the power of the ocean and how important it was to our livelihood. We had our Tamil paddlers. It was an important trade system for our people. It wasn't just a matter of riding the currents, but it was a matter of feeding our people and supported trade within our tribes. When I think of a maritime culture, I think about how it supported us again in feeding our people. Our grandmother talked about the spirit world of the ocean. So that deep connection again. So just if you don't mind, closing your eyes real quick. And just imagine diving down deep into the ocean. And you're going to a whole different world. And my grandmother talks about swordfish men that lived at the bottom of the ocean. And these were the spiritual beings that were so strong that they could grab whales and toss them around by their tail. And at times they would toss them so high that they would fall upon our shorelines. And our people would go to gather the whales for food, to help build houses, use them for our doorways, for our traditional houses. This is a time of spiritual connection. You can open your eyes now. These seaweed men lived in crystal houses at the bottom of the ocean. So when I think about maritime culture, I really just take myself and I wanted to take you down to a place where our ancestors take us, to a deep connection, down to the bottom of the ocean. I'm hearing about scientific exploration. What does that mean to us? For me, actually, I just speak for myself as a Chumash person. It opens my eyes and connects me to those traditional stories, what our ancestors seen, and how that can work hand in hand with the scientific work that's happening today. I do want to answer the second part of that. Do I believe, is this the greatest era of ocean exploration in history? Yes, I think through a Western lens, but I also think that my ancestors have been exploring these waters, of course, since time immemorial. And, for all Indigenous people, I know that's true for them as well. They were deep sea fishermen, they were divers. They dove for abalone, sea urchins, and mussels. Again, they understood the currents and the tides. They had a deep respect of the ocean and themselves. So it was a place of prayer and that spiritual connection. So I wanted to go back to that question.
Thank you for doing that, and thank you for also taking us on that journey. I think I could see what your description of what your ancestors were doing. That was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So to keep us going, again, the question might be for a little provocative, but has there been a recent engagement with maritime heritage? It could be an expedition, it could be a discovery that has rewritten your own expectations for our understanding of our oceans and Great Lakes. And I'll add to that as a reflection, listening to you all this morning, what I am hearing is how we are centering people at the center of these stories. And it makes me also think a little bit about the possibilities for our own well-being and understanding maritime heritage.
Rather than a specific thing, having been in this world for about 30 years now, from all different sides, from an education point of view, from a marine archaeologist, cultural resource manager, grant manager, a museum professional. I think the thing that's most exciting for me is to see, Dr. Jacobs mentioned it, that public-private partnership that seems to be having on on exploration, on the museum world, on all of these different aspects. There are more wrecks that are found by private people out there looking for it, and then working with marine sanctuaries, working with the state underwater archaeologists, working with museums, because they want to see these stories shared. So I think that's one of the most exciting things, some of the barriers breaking down between old-time treasure divers, right, who had been salvaging things in the 60s and 70s, certainly not how we would do it today, but it was the culture of the day and what they were doing. And having some of these resources, some of these artifacts come back to where the public can see them, where their stories can be interpreted, where they can be conserved. And with these different programs that can use technology that an individual would never be able to do. I think that's one of the most exciting things happening these days.
I would add that I fully agree. And then maybe the next step, which I'm sure you would also consider, is the interdisciplinary nature of the work. Again, there may not be a single instance that I would raise, but the thing that has fascinated me as I've grown through about 2 decades of investigating maritime heritage sites is just the relation between the maritime heritage site and the environment, and then the impact of the environment on the maritime heritage site as well, and how that then can inform and educate us about our reaching to the people that you addressed earlier. But for example, some of the very deep water sites, Yorktown, Indianapolis, Lexington, that were discovered over the last 10 years or so, the state of preservation is astounding. You can see sailor art still preserved on these sites. A similar state of preservation can be found in the Black Sea with some of the Byzantine wrecks, and that was one of the earlier instances where I learned the value of interdisciplinary research, because there were different internal waves in the Black Sea, and if you were below 110 meters, for example, you reach a point where the oxygen level is so low that you may still find a 500 or 1,000-year-old shipwreck standing proud, because the bacteria aren't consuming the wood as elsewhere. But then there are other areas where you've seen the impact and just how dynamic the marine environment is. We've seen a submarine off the coast of Maryland move 400 meters from where we thought it was and from where it was previously mapped by NOAA. We've seen our sites change over the period of a decade or two since we've last investigated them. So we've seen sites in the North Sea not be there anymore because they've been covered by sand. And so to me, the most fascinating aspect is investigating that dynamic between treating maritime heritage sites as also natural resources, and then expanding the pool of researchers that interpret them, and you can learn from each other.
And I think that's just to pick up on that a little bit further, that these heritage sites are in natural resource sites, right? They're not just submerged shipwrecks. They literally can be that ecological heritage as well. Let me go forward and ask another couple of questions here. So, first of all, we do have a strong Western lens to when we talk about maritime heritage, right? And I think that's changing. We are becoming, by nature, I think, a more inclusive nation. And I think one of the things that I have witnessed, even in my short time in working with and partnering with National Marine Sanctuaries, is a very strong and active approach that is sort of community-centered in engaging with our waters. That is tapping into sort of the Western structures of things like U.S. Marine Protected Areas, right? This very Western idea of what a place might be, versus an ancestral land or water. So my question, I'll start with you, Nakia, is, what is the opportunity for us to raise up and elevate indigenous practices voices and knowledge in the stewardship of protected areas like sanctuaries and other state waters and things like that that are given that landscape through that Western lens.
Yeah, for the Chumash National Marine Sanctuary, we have definitely looked towards our tribes up in Washington for some great examples of what they've done with ensuring that Indigenous voices and tribes are included with that co-stewardship within these areas. And I think it really is a matter of really sitting at the table and ensuring that their voices are being heard and they're being respected, and that opportunity to share what they want to share within a very safe space for those people. I can say, again, I'd like to speak on my behalf for my Chumash culture, the importance of being able to have those conversations and the sanctuaries being that place where different agencies come together. Local community people are coming together, and I'm able to have those critical conversations and sharing of information in spaces that were never there before. And I think really it's really just about sharing space and relationships. And with relationships comes that trust. And with that trust, we're building a great sanctuary that is inclusive of all, but also is led through Indigenous knowledge. And I really think it just really rolls back to relationships, and not even just with Native communities, Indigenous communities, but with all communities that are accessing our ocean in different ways and have their own stories and their own heritage and connection. I think that's very important as well.
May I just echo what Nakia just said too? I was very fortunate. I started the Mariners Museum in 2016. In 2016, the Polynesian Voyaging Society in Hokulea was still in the process of circumnavigating the globe. And we were very, very fortunate that they stopped in Newport News, Virginia. And they lifted Hokulea out of the water and brought it to the Mariners Museum for dry dock for 6 weeks. And they were working. We used that as an opportunity to engage the Indigenous tribes on the Virginia Peninsula. And they were able to commune with those representatives of the Polynesian Voyaging Society that were crewing Hokulea at the time. And it was not us doing a program, right? Which is the way sometimes we think as cultural institutions, like what exhibit are we going to do to tell people? What program are we going to do to tell people? We just offered the space and then kind of got out of the way. And I would tell you we are really working hard as an institution to get out of the way, to kind of, to use a Western term, right, to democratize the stewardship of maritime heritage. And so the two ways that we're trying to accomplish that is that we are converting a number of our galleries now to accessible storage. And we're trying to move artifacts out of behind the door storage, right? Like many collecting institutions, 97% of our collection is in storage, right? Inaccessible to people. So let's just store it in our galleries and then allow people to come in, use our collection to tell their stories, right? Number one. And number two, then to the extent that we want to capture some of those stories, we established a Mariners Archive program, whereas people in our community that come into our gallery space and are able to find that thing that means something to them, they're able to record their story with us. So again, it's much more of a stewardship-based form of engagement than it is an interpretive kind of form of engagement.
If I can pick up on that, I'm not the first to observe the sea is obviously both a boundary but also a bridge. And maritime heritage really transcends geopolitical, geographical, societal boundaries in many ways. And the Navy is in a perhaps a unique or certainly a rare position where our shipwrecks or our aircraft wrecks are very frequently in other people's waters. We don't manage the water column. We don't manage the area. We're responsible for preserving a cultural resource site many times abroad, approximately half of our sites are located in international foreign waters. So as a consequence, we're very reliant on collaboration and partnerships, and very attuned to different perceptions of heritage. A World War II shipwreck off the coast of Indonesia called Houston is perceived in a very different way from a U.S. audience as it is from an Indonesian lens. And so, and sometimes our statutes, our laws are complementary, sometimes they're not. And so I think what we try to focus on is the ultimate goal, which is the preservation and interpretation of this heritage in multiple different ways. And so ultimately, we're more successful in certain areas than others, but you have to approach it with an open mind. Otherwise, you can't really foster that interdisciplinary, international, multi-faceted view of these sites.
Let me pick up on that and ask Keith a question about the role, since you talked about, Alexis, boundaries and bridges and blurring these lines. So the role of mapping in storytelling and in capturing a way of understanding this heritage. Can you give us a sense of what Esri is doing in this space and maybe what any commitments there might be?
Yeah, thanks. I was just thinking about how each one of these folks were talking about their different mediums for sharing the stories, whether it's a museum, or I was actually talking with Nakia just before we came on stage here. She was talking about how they use story maps within her organization to help share and communicate how important the work that they're doing is. So not only is there a spatial component that gets described in the form of a map. Maybe it's the path of the Hokulea, or maybe it's this coastal zone that indigenous knowledge had to be collected through participatory mapping. The story maps are the avenue that we find these different communities using to pull the narrative in behind the map. So a map is kind of face value. You can explore it, you can understand it, but when you put the context behind it, you kind of have the democratized version of a museum exhibit that you can share with someone through a link. So as they scroll through the story map, they can see the time component, the temporal component of the Hokulele's voyage, or of indigenous fishing efforts that were conducted. So I get excited because I think that gets back to one of our first questions about the heritage and the accumulation of this information, but then having a platform to collect it on and share it with is one thing, but then to add the context of the experts, of the communities, of the indigenous folks that lived it is really, and you can feel it as you're exploring those story maps and kind of relive that experience, and I think it's a wonderful form of the digital transformation of that.
Yeah, I do want to add to that too, because mapping and that data storage and sharing that with tribes is obviously very important to our data sovereignty, and we're able to get that information and then add important cultural layers to that. So we're creating our shape files, and just adding layers upon layers with ancestral knowledge, and are perhaps some things that we are coming across today within these specific areas. So it is absolutely important, and sharing that is really the future for this work to be done.
Yeah, and I have to say too, just sometimes we all in the room, we want to sort of shake people and say, hey, this is really important. You should pay attention to what we're doing over here, right? And I think we have to have the humility too to sometimes let just cool technology lead the way, right? That we kind of capture people's imaginations with a submersible. Wow, that's really that's really cool technology. And our most recent example of that was through the Monitor National Marine Sanctuary, which is headquartered right there at the Mariners Museum. And Tane Casserly is a member of the sanctuary, and he worked with Northrop Grumman to do a microsas scan of Monitor. And in 2022, I think it was, they did a submersible, expedition on Monitor, and using that technology as a way to capture people's imagination with the technology first. And then once they're in it, then they start to ask the question, so wait, what is that again? Tell me the story again, right? And we kind of backdoor the heritage, or we backdoor, Monitor now is exactly as you said earlier, Joel, is in its third life cycle, right? And that third life cycle is it's a living wreath. So just, I think this whole idea of technology kind of kicking the door open for these more abstract topics that we're talking about is awesome.
And that exploration is something that's done by the explorer, not us.
Exactly.
And our various organizations telling people just what the story is. It's inviting people to explore. Yeah.
And let me follow up on that and just ask another question. Obviously, these new technologies and are exciting, and they are certainly making heritage more accessible, but how do we balance access to these sites with protection, which in some cases are sacred sites? Anyone want to pick up on that? Alexis, maybe?
Sure. To touch on the first part of your question, NOAA's Office of Coast Survey has recently surveyed the southern portion of Lake Michigan. And Lake Michigan in World War II served as a training ground for carrier pilots. They all went and got qualified off 2 vessels in Lake Michigan and then went off to the Pacific. 120 or so aircraft were lost during those training operations. 70, we believe, still remain in the lake. And the Office of Coast Survey was mapping the coastline for hazards to navigation, for multiple different ocean uses. But in that data captured about 20 aircraft, which we believe and have verified about 12 of them are associated with that period of time. And that data is made public, of course, because there are multiple different uses for that data. In many ways, those aircraft were protected by virtue of being obscure. And lifting the veil of obscurity does pose challenges from a manager's standpoint as to how do we preserve these sites. And I think it comes down to 3 things. The first one goes back to the collaboration and partnership discussion we had earlier. None of us are resourced to independently care for a broad swath of heritage sites that might fall under our management as federal agencies. So we partner and collaborate with local communities, state officials, and other federal agencies, as well as others, stakeholders, to try and protect the sites. The second part is education, public education and awareness. The reason the sites are important may help protect them if we are able to get the public to appreciate them and recognize what they symbolize. And the third, paradoxically, might be technology. If we can somehow remotely monitor sites in such a way as to be alerted if there are activities that might disturb them occurring nearby, that could help us keep an eye on things. And it's probably going to be a combination of those 3 things. But for our command, obviously one of the most important things is that many of these sites represent maritime grave sites or war graves. Going back to your reference earlier about lenses, I find that these sites are multifaceted, and I've used that term earlier, but they might be cultural, they might hold cultural value, historical value. They might represent grave sites. They might hold environmental hazards or public safety hazards. And so we need to manage them as a whole, and typically you're able to reach through a frame of reference and capture an audience in that way. And say, well, you deeply care about these sites because your grandfather may have served and was lost on a ship. And so that is the frame of reference that I will connect with you through. Or you care about the environmental preservation of that coastline because you're a fisherman and you don't want oil to be released from one of those sites and impact your livelihood. And so we're going to discuss how to preserve sites through that lens, effectively. So it's a challenge, and I welcome any suggestions and any assistance.
Well, it sounds very complex, and I sort of have a question, and maybe as a follow-up for Nakia, because you are now helping to, in partnership with NOAA and through other organizations on the ground in the area, and through the San Ynez Chumash Band, stewarding a sanctuary. So what are your goals in supporting the sanctuary and thinking about the cultural heritage there? And have you gotten to a place, I know it's been about a year or so since the designation of that sanctuary, where those goals are getting crystallized enough to share maybe with us?
I think from a tribal perspective, I think we're still coming together to work as tribes to come up with what our goals are. And this new designation and ensuring the proper representation and that our traditional ecological knowledge is at the forefront. So this co-stewardship is certainly a really big opportunity for us to put our voice forward. I do want to speak to, as the chair of the advisory council, what I found to be my goals for the chair is to promote local, state, and nationwide education of the sanctuary, so people know where we're at and the importance of it. Certainly the name will let people know where we're at, if you know where the Chumash people are from. But also, really taking on that educational component and reaching out and educating our younger generation, because they're our future caretakers of our ocean. They're the future conservationists, and we need to ensure that they know as much as they can. So when I think about data, when I think about all the research, and for me, for our tribal community, the importance of passing down our traditional stories and our ways are so important. And of course, the ocean is so important to us as Chumash people. So far I've seen some great work happening. Again, I'm having conversations with agencies. I'm talking to local people I've never spoken to before. I'm having great conversations with our local Chumash tribes, and it is all just very positive and wonderful and so enlightening. And I think that's what sanctuaries are about. It's about bringing people together. It's about celebrating this huge body of water that, although it's a sanctuary, it's all one water. It's all connected, even though they're separated, right? MPAs, sanctuaries, we can call it what we want, but those lines really don't exist to our whales. They don't exist to the salmon, to the steelhead. They are all, navigating these waters and surviving. And I think that's important when I think about the role within the sanctuary, and that to look at it very holistically and inclusive of all. I mean, even going out further, again, throughout the whole world, and how our ocean is so important to us. So this is what I carry with me when I'm sitting there and working with our advisory council. And then also, the importance of collaborating with the tribes for co-stewardship. Again, this work is just beginning, and there's a lot more to come, and it's a very exciting time. We have our tribal government seat person here, Kathleen Marshall, so it's great to have, our tribal representation at that level as well, because consultation is very important. And that really does ensure that sovereignty is being acknowledged. And I do want to thank NOAA for that, and that partnership, and that opportunity, and that respect. What else can I say about that? I get excited. I see, a program for veterans to come out and surf within our sanctuary. I see so much support for community. I get excited about our inland schools, our tribal communities coming out and wanting to learn more about the ocean. So again, it's just that connection and not setting boundaries and seeing how much our oceans impact everyone.
Thank you for that. So we have time for maybe one more question, and then we will open it up for questions from the audience, and that way we can have you guys respond to some of their thoughts. And we'll do two questions, one for Cathy, and then we'll do a question for everyone. So Cathy, the National Maritime Historical Society creates a opportunity and a way for the public to join, a collective of people who have these interests and learn about a wide variety of maritime heritage activities. And in your stewardship of the society, I'm wondering if you've come across this feeling that heritage can be overlooked, or that there are stories that you think are so critical, so important to our understanding of our way of life, who we are, that still need to be told.
Well, I always say all history is maritime history, and with the big country, and I live in the middle of the country. I live in the Midwest, so that may not come first to mind. But if you think about our history as a nation, the North American as a continent, it is those waterways. It is the fact that people could move across the country by water. And whether that was 2,000 years ago or today, when our global economy, we know more than ever, is tied together by the waters of this world. That story, that underlying story, that foundational thing, I think is what we, whether we're with a marine sanctuary, a museum, with the Navy, I think that'll help the relevance. Your last question about how do we safely kind of balance access and preserve these sites. As we've said in sanctuaries for many years, people will care about what they, people will preserve what they really care about. And so we have to make those connections, or we have to introduce those connections, or ways for them to figure out for themselves, what is my connection? I love what you've been talking about, what Howard's been talking about connecting with community, and how by doing that, it just is going to feed on this preservation ethic in the people who will be able to, to carry this on.
I love that. And I think that takes me right into our sort of final question for all of you. If you care to answer this, how are we going to do this work in bringing up this next generation? I think of my own life and my own journey to ocean conservation and maritime heritage protection, and I sure wasn't thinking about it in the 8th grade or even in my college years. It was a journey. What kind of messages should we have, or what should we be thinking about as we go forward to engage that next generation in this work?
I think we create a sense of wonder and curiosity, and really just speaking to the beauty of the ocean. And I really think that, for me, that this is what I think helps open up, especially our children, to connect more with this body of water, and just really get them to wonder about it, and have that genuine curiosity. What lives in our ocean? What's connected to our ocean? Who's connected to our ocean? And let them, in some ways, guide us and teach us, because I think sometimes we need to go back to maybe being a child and playing in the water and enjoying the water, and just really getting that moving inside of them. And I really like what you said about how people the water's connected, and the journey through the water, everybody did.
Yeah.
And I've thought about that, and that's why I say, our next generation just really needs to be introduced and given that opportunity for that curiosity.
Love it. Thank you. Keith.
I think that our next generations aren't going to learn in the same ways that we've learned. So in terms of ocean literacy, I don't think that's going to be done through textbooks for our next generations. I think that the spatial component drives some interest there. So the same ways that the oceans are explored, I think the future generations need to be able to explore a map or explore a story to better understand the context and the spatial relationships and the associations between things. And I think with ocean literacy, there should be this spatial literacy that goes along with it in order to better understand the relationships between the people in the ocean and the relationships between heritage and the ocean and why things are where they are. So I think that there's a huge opportunity there, and I think that we need to be innovative in how we provide that medium to those to my kids, to the future generations that are learning things now. They're much more hands-on than we were, and textbooks. I think that's becoming, I don't want to say obsolete, but just a more challenging avenue to communicate the complexity of what we're talking about up here.
Can I jump in on the wonder and the hands-on and experiential is kind of the ticket for us. And so we live in the Hampton Roads region is where the Mariners Museum is, and the public school systems in the Hampton Roads region have really high concentrations of poverty, a lot of Title I schools in those public school systems. And we now have a 6th grade kayak program where we bring every 6th grader from now 3 different school districts within that system to come just get on a kayak in Mariners Lake, right? It's a lake, it's fresh, it's a stormwater fed lake. A lot of these kids that show up haven't even seen the water, much less ever been on a kayak. And I'll tell you, they show up scared. It's a lake, and they say, "Are there sharks in here?" Right? And no sharks. But the bottom line is, when you get in a kayak, nobody can paddle that thing for you. You've got to get on, you've got to navigate, and of course they do fine. They do great. And by the end of it, they're having a blast, and they've overcome a fear. And for a lot of those kids, it's the first time that they've had to face a fear on their own and solve it on their own, overcome it on their own. And it gives them some agency, and they'll forever associate that with the water, number one. Number two is, we're okay if they just have fun to start. So we threw a bunch of scavenger hunts into our galleries, and the kids just show up and they run around, try to find a bunch of maritime stuff, come back, and we give them a sticker at the end, right? Just to kind of get out of our own way. And I have to say that all that work right there can only happen in partnership. And so we're very fortunate, like I said, that the Modern National Marine Sanctuary is headquartered right there at the Mariners Museum. And so Tane or Kyra helped design and deliver the educational enrichment programs that we're designing and delivering for these kids. And the last thing that I'll share is just, I think we had to own as an institution, not speaking for the field, this isn't a proposal for the whole world or whatever. I'm just telling you our journey. Our journey at the Mariners Museum was at some point early on, as we started to say, we have to be more of a community resource, less as an attraction. We had to own the fact that if we're building a museum for people with a preformed interest in maritime history, we're building a museum for like that many people. And that number is unfortunately getting smaller. Right. So that's nobody's fault. I don't think it's because there's something wrong with us or there's something wrong with the people in the world. It's just, that's reality. So we have to deal with that. And how do we deal with it? I've shared a couple of ways over the course of today that we're dealing with it. But another is as we expand the circle of people that might be invested or interested in maritime history, conservation ends up being one of the ways we do that. Our Director of Conservation, Will Hoffman, is here. And if any of you are going to the galas or the awards tonight, you should talk to Will because he'll correct everything I'm about to say. But the bottom line is that our conservation work is open and accessible to the public. We have large glass windows that look into our lab space. And we do a lot of our educational enrichment programs actually engage kids on the science that's happening in the lab. And for many of them, they're going to be more interested in that to start than the facts and figures of the Battle of Hampton Roads on March 8th and 9th of 1862, when the Virginia steamed out of the Elizabeth River to the Union Northern Blockading Squadron, right? I'm glazing over saying that, right?
Right.
And so for these kids to engage them with chemistry and things like this is a way, again, to sort of backdoor the really important, weighty things that we're talking about on the panel today.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Well, we have time for a couple of questions from the audience. Does anybody have any questions for our panelists? Any other thoughts or questions? I'm looking. No?
You know, Howard, when
All right.
I had this little moment when you said if we just built museums for people who have that special interest in maritime history, as one of those small people, something I've thought about a lot is that maritime history, maritime heritage, it's not about nostalgia, and this is somebody who has a magazine called Sea History. It is relevance, and it's I think what the work that everybody doing up here understands that's what we have to do.
That's it.
That's what we have to do.
So I think we have a question back here. Yes?
My name is Hastings, and I would like to focus on President Nakia. I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, and I had the pleasure of spending time with the Wampanoag Indians and the Bashkir Indians, so I have great respect. For the last 25 years, in the wintertime, I go out to Santa Barbara, and I've got to go to Channel Island very often. I take a 3-mile walk every morning on the beach or late in the afternoon to watch the sunset. My concern is the oil deposits on the waters and almost a recklessness with the oil that's being shot out there. The wonderful movie that Kevin Costner narrated in Oxford is wonderful with the national preservation group up there. The Channel Islands are extremely fragile, and I think that has to be really seriously brought up to the attention of people who are drilling oil out there.
Thank you for that question. And I'm just going to repeat a couple of things because we didn't have a mic for that question, but there was an expression of great passion and love for the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuaries, and the Channel Islands, which are nearby and actually part of ancestral Chumash territory. And the gentleman brought up the issue of seeing oil sheens on the water and has great concern for oil, which I do think is a question for you, Nakia, but also all of us in how we navigate environmental threats to heritage.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all know the problem's much bigger. You know, it goes back to policy issues and protection of our oceans. You know, I would just say, you know, right now, what we're doing right now is we're part of decommissioning of some of those offshore rigs. Mm-hmm. So that's very promising to me to see that work happening and that, you know, our environment will be better for our ocean. Mm-hmm. It's certainly something that we all need to keep an eye on. But again, I think that's just a much bigger issue that, you know, honestly, I leave up to my tribal leadership to handle. Yeah. We have great tribal leadership to support that work.
Your mention of policy, I think, is apt in the sense that here we are at Capitol Hill Ocean Week, and we have that opportunity to be on the Hill and talk to policymakers about how we do this work. Keith?
Yeah, I just want to, you know, talk about, you know, it's easy to look at the oil rigs offshore in that region, but there's also a lot of naturally occurring oil seeps that occur around Point Conception as well. So those seeps contribute to a lot of the sheen and other things that are there. I'm not saying that that's but that is always a factor that we're going to have to deal with, is the naturally occurring side of things that are out there, and those are oil-rich areas, and it finds a way to make it out into the ocean, and we see that in the Gulf, we see that around Point Conception, And so regardless, it's there, and I'm not taking away from the need of the policy when I say that.
I appreciate you saying that. My daughter just sent me an article about those seeps at Point Conception, which is within the sanctuary.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we have had a fantastic conversation. I want to thank all the panelists for your engagement and also shaping and guiding the conversation. I certainly learned a lot more about maritime heritage. I have a different perspective than when I started this conversation, listening to your comments. So thank you all so much. And audience, let's thank the panelists, please. So we are going to wrap up for the morning and go into our lunch break. And so we will give us an opportunity to, again, get some food, caffeinate, take a break, and get prepared for an exciting afternoon. I want to, again, say thank you to my panelists and remind everyone to please, if you can, share your thoughts online, tag the conference with CHOW 2026, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the other side. Thank you again.